Welcome to Cranfield University. It's fantastic to have you join us. My name is Toby Thompson. I'm the studio director here in the glorious Granville Turner Studios. Thank you for taking time out of your busy days, your busy and complex days. We know you have complex lives, and I mention that because we're here on an MBA Masterclass around strategy and complexity. So if that is of interest to you, and I'm sure it is, otherwise you wouldn't be here, then please, we are very keen to hear from you. You're going to hear from several speakers who I'll introduce very shortly, but this is an interactive session. So do me a favor, on the text chat, for those of us joining the live session, tell us where you are in the world. You know how to use Zoom text chat. Tell us where you are in the world. It makes us feel good if we know that you're from all over the world. If you're from London in the UK, fantastic. If you're from anywhere else, please put it into the Zoom text chat. We're going to be together until 1:30 UK times, whatever that ends up being at your time, because we have a masterclass, and then we're going to be talking a little bit about the MBA. We're going to hear from an amazing alumnus of the MBA who we all know. It's like a family reunion. Then we're going to be talking about the exec MBA, and then it's a free-for-all question and answer. So please let us know. Tokyo, Thailand, India, Philippines. Fantastic. Dorothy, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Joining me in the studio, and it gives me great pleasure to welcome back to the studio, Andrey Pavlov, Professor Andrey Pavlov. It's fantastic to have you here, and you're going to be the main dish. I'm using a culinary metaphor here.
Whatever works for you, Toby.
I call it a main dish anyway. So stick around because you're going to be hearing more from Andrey. We also have an amazing threesome of people. Look at that. Leila, give us a smile. Are you real or are you artificial? We love you. Leila, we love you. Director of the MBA. Matt, Director of the Exec MBA in the middle. There's a wave. Look at that wave. And then last but not least, Nadine, all the way from the Cotswolds in the UK in a hotel. So if you hear any noise behind Nadine, it's because it's a public space. So we're going to be hearing more from these people very shortly after we've heard from Andrey. Andrey has some slides. We want your questions. Is it fair to say that you want everyone's questions? So if Andrey stirs something up for you, you've got a query, you've got a challenge of some sort, and we hope that you do, please pile into the text chat, because this is what we do at Cranfield School of Management. We engage, we get disagreements, and we start a fantastic conversation. Is that fair to say?
Absolutely.
Oh, you can disagree with that, of course.
Yes, please channel your questions to the chat room, and Toby will pick it up and pass it over to me.
And I will voice your question, no audio today, just text. I'll voice the question, put them to Andrey, and he will respond. I'm going to hand over to you and to your slides, Andrey.
Fantastic. Thank you, Toby. And first of all, let me start by extending a warm welcome to everyone here. So I'll be with you for maybe just over half an hour. As Toby already said, I'm Andrey Pavlov, and I'm Professor of Strategy and Performance here at the School of Management. And in my role as the head of strategy group, I also look after a team of 6 faculty members who do research and teaching across all aspects of strategy, across all programs in the School of Management and beyond, in other schools of the university as well. And I personally teach strategy on both Full-time MBA, where I lead the core module on strategy, and on the Executive MBA, where I lead the module on advanced strategy, which you will take if you do the MBA in the second year of your Executive MBA. So when the school and Toby and Leila and Matt asked me to talk to you about strategy, I thought, well, what would be the best angle? What would be the best aspect to pick up today? And what I thought I'd do is actually try and challenge you a little bit and give you a slightly more unconventional and unorthodox approach to strategy. We'll try and stretch our thinking about strategy a little bit and see where it leads us, if that's okay with you. So let me start by doing this, by saying this. I think, in a way, I mean, the discipline of management is huge and multifaceted, and there are so many different questions we ask about different aspects of management. But if I think about the core challenges of strategy, I think they could be boiled down to 2 big issues. One is we are asking you as strategists to pursue your intentions, to pursue your goals in a world that is not controllable, that is not under your control, and the world that is constantly in flux and uncertain, right? That's one big issue, right? We are asking you to actually follow your intentions, follow your goals, pursue your goals, but in a world that actually is not stable or predictable. And this point has become a cliche, and I don't want to kind of belabor it too much. But just as an illustration of this, I want to show you this graph. And so this is the graph of the Bank of England interest rates over the past 50 years, right? If you just look at this, and you look at the kind of left side of this graph, the beginning of the graph, and you'll see the interest rates fluctuating between 10%, 14%, going up to 16 and 17%. And if you think about it, people who have lived through that period of time in the economy, could they have possibly predicted that at some point the interest rates will crash to nearly zero? Right? And I would venture a guess that they couldn't. I mean, this is just not a way you see the world, right? You're thinking about your mortgage rates, you're thinking about borrowing costs, and you're thinking about double digits. And to imagine that this is going to crash to nearly zero is almost unthinkable, right? And even those who could have predicted it, could they have predicted that they would stay, that the interest rates would stay that low for that long, right? And at the moment they sort of rebounded, but we don't know where they're going to go. So this is completely, this is very volatile, but also completely unpredictable. Because if you think about it, you can't even use the power of statistics to estimate where this is going to go. Because statistics rests on some sort of regularities, right? Some sort of patterns, existing patterns in the world. But of course, these are not patterns. And the only way to know what's going to happen is to live through this. Right? So this is even statistically unestimable. So that's one big issue. One big issue is that we are kind of pursuing our objectives, our intentions in the world that is constantly in flux and very difficult to predict, or impossible to predict, I would say. The other big side of the issue is that when we pursue our intentions, we don't do it ourselves. We do it through other people. Right? So that means we have to organize, motivate, control, if you can, right? And lead different people, each of whom have their own intentions, their own preferences, their own ways of doing things, their own motivations, desires, and so on and so forth, right? And so if you combine these two big things, the inability to estimate where the world is going and the necessity to pursue your objectives through people, that gives you, I think, the core of the issue in strategy, in strategic management, right? The question is, well, how do you deal with this? And I would say that you tend to approach this based on your worldview. And when I say a worldview, I mean a set of basic assumptions about how the world works, how the world is put together, how the world functions, and what tends to work in this world. And I'll show you two worldviews today. They're quite different. I will intentionally sort of push them to their extremes, but as hopefully you will see, this is not too much of an exaggeration. This is really how people tend to think. And so one of these worldviews is very familiar to all of you because this is how we traditionally think about strategy and management. And I call it the mechanistic worldview. It is built on the assumptions that we borrowed from engineering and economics, and in particular neoclassical economics. So just a couple of illustrations, or a couple of points about what this worldview looks like. One big assumption here is that resources that we need to pursue our goals are generic and interchangeable, right? A pound is just like any other pound. A dollar is just like any other dollar. A barrel of oil is just like any other barrel of oil, right? And so you just move stuff around. But this, of course, in this worldview also includes things like knowledge, experience, and talent, right? And in fact, a few years ago, I was speaking with a VP of a very large tech company, and she said very proudly that in this organization, we hire 500 million worth of labor every year. Just pause for a second to think about what this means. $500 million worth of labor, so that's what they hire, right? So like as if labor is a generic kind of resource, just like water or oil or milk or whatever it is, right? Or sand or grain, right? But this sort of thinking is very symptomatic of the mechanistic worldview. The other big thing about this mechanistic worldview is that the key idea here is that you get to the answer by doing analysis. Right? You try to understand how this world is put together so that you can take it apart, optimize it, and put it back together in a better way. Right? So it could be understood by breaking things apart. And you see this a lot when people think about how organizations are put together. So we've got an accounting department, we've got logistics, we've got operations, you name it, we've got human resources, right? And all of these departments have their own heads of department. They're responsible for the performance of that department. Right? And then when they come together, then they kind of fight their corner. Right? And so, for example, if you have an issue with inventory, it's a logistics problem, has nothing to do with accounting. Right? Or if you have an issue with bullying, that's an HR problem, and so the HR person will fix it. And if the HR person can't fix it, then we hire a specialist consultant, an HR consultant, to help them fix it, right? Because the idea is that if you optimize every part of the business, then the entire business works well. So this kind of sort of very analytical way of thinking about organizations. The other implication of this, of course, is that this emphasis on analysis means that we are constantly looking for cause and effect linkages, right? So what generates performance? What is the driver of performance, right? So for example, if we are in a call center, we're thinking, okay, so can we see that, for example, the number of calls that we make leads to more revenue, right? And in that case, the obvious conclusion is that we have to increase the number of calls, right? Or is it the length of the call? In that case, well, maybe we should increase the length of the call. Right? So we're trying to figure out, okay, what's the formula inside the business that generates performance? And of course, you can scale it up. And this thinking is endemic, not just in organizational management, but in public management as well, right? So what generates health, right? So for example, we know that smoking has negative effects on health. Therefore, let's launch a campaign to eliminate or reduce smoking. Right? So that kind of cause and effect kind of thinking. And of course, the idea here is that we can look at the past to try and predict the future. We can try and see what has happened before, analyze it, see the patterns, identify the cause and effect linkages, and hopefully this will give us a tool, an instrument for managing performance in the future. Right? I'm going to kind of stop here and not give you any more detail because I think all of you are very, very familiar with this kind of thinking. If you've studied management before, or indeed if you've worked in any organization, right? The implication of this is that managers can control organizations and should control organizations. And in fact, what this worldview would say is that you are here on this call thinking about doing an MBA because the MBA will give you a set of tools for controlling organizations better. Right? So we'll give you a toolbox, which will allow you to pick the right tool for the job. You apply it, and voila, you get better performance. And then, of course, that means that organizations could be run through a set of tools. And these tools include various procedures, processes, KPIs, targets, and so on and so forth. Bonuses, right? Bonus schemes where you align incentives and so on and so forth, right? So it's a kind of way of thinking about improving performance that is based on levers and buttons, right? And the reason we can identify these levers and buttons, or the way we can identify these levers and buttons, is by doing analysis, right? By looking at the data, crunching the numbers, analyzing it. Right? So to me, the epitome of this worldview is the study that was done by a group of researchers back in the 90s when they looked at Sears, a very famous American retailer. So they've looked at this massive organization, massive nationwide national retailer in America, and they looked at three pieces of data: employee attitude, employee satisfaction, and revenues, right? The financials. So they've crunched the numbers, they've ran the regressions, and this is what they have come up with. This is the outcome of the study. And I know it's a terrible practice to actually read the slides, but if you allow me, I'm just going to read this out, just one sentence here. So a 5-unit increase in employee attitude drives a 1.3 unit increase in customer impressions, which in turn drives 0.5% in revenue growth. So basically what this means is that if I want to increase my revenue by 5%, all I need to do is to jack up my employee attitude by 50 units. I know this is supposed to be kind of a masterclass where I'm talking to you, but I find it very difficult to just lecture without interaction. So let me actually pause here for a second and ask you, as a manager, how useful do you find this? And also, if you're looking at this, can you spot any issues with this? I'll give you a few minutes to think about it and put it in the chat room, and then I'll ask Toby to read it out to me, if there are any views.
Nothing so far, but it will come.
How useful is it, and do you see any issues with this?
I was going to ask you, what do you think the answer is, but you're going to tell us. You would use the word inestimable earlier on. This seems to be the opposite of inestimable.
It's supremely measurable.
Supremely calculable. How do you get the two? So, Pratibha, quantifying might not be the right approach. Thank you. Kicking us off. Quantifying might not be the right approach.
Okay, thank you.
It doesn't imply it's the wrong approach. Might not be the right approach. Suraj says, it's useful, but I feel this feels a bit absolute. It's not facts. I'm not sure if I'm explaining properly, but I think you've got it across there. Thank you for that.
Yeah, no, that's exactly it. And that's the kind of thinking, right? It's as if this is a law, right? So it's almost like pining for the same kind of certainty that physics gives us, right? Or at least mechanics in physics, right? The classical physics.
Some more. Saad says, human element of employee cannot be equated with revenue. This tells us a lot about the whole organization. Nice.
Indeed,
Nice.
indeed. So just the choice of what we are trying to connect to revenue gives us an idea of what this organization is like. The first comment about quantification is also very interesting, right? So all of this is very relevant, right? So you can kind of see that it points towards some sort of relationship, but actually, if you think about it, what the heck is a unit of employee attitude anyway, right? Speaking about measurement and quantification. I mean, what is a unit of employee attitude?
There's a couple more. Can I just ask Richard? Richard's saying, and Richard, thank you. Surely the 5-unit increase is only possible when currently poor attitude exists.
Absolutely.
Can you keep growing using this linearly over time?
Absolutely.
Yay.
Even if this is true, right? So even if we assume that the first 5-unit increase gives you 0.5%, will the second 5-unit increase give you the same? The third, the fourth, right? I agree with you, Richard. Absolutely, absolutely not. Right? At some point, you're going to get to diminishing returns as well.
Richard, we want to see you here. Sarah, likewise. Sarah's saying, assume straight line cause and effect, and assumes constant improvement ad nauseum, which is kind of what you said.
Absolutely, absolutely, yeah. And then you can ask other questions. I mean, if you look at this, for example, it's got 3 pieces of data. What about the environment around this organization, right? What about wars, inflation, breakdowns in logistics chains, right? Pandemics, right? All of that stuff. This is conveniently pushed aside, right? And the kind of the drive here, the goal here is, well, can we possibly identify an underlying universal law, right, that will give us a lever that we can pull so we can increase employee attitude by 5 units and get revenue growth, right? So I don't want to belabor the point, but you can see this. And to me, this is a very, very telling example of this sort of mechanistic thinking. And if you look at the date of this, so this is 1998. This is you could say that this is how we used to think about management. But if you think about your current experience, I would venture a guess that you probably see this quite often, even today. And I have, of course, lots of examples of how this manifests today as well. And so, to summarize it, right? To summarize this view, basically what it suggests is that at its core, the world is knowable and controllable. And if there are islands of uncertainty and emergence, these are just the things that we haven't learned to control yet. We haven't learned to analyze and understand, right? How to analyze and understand, right? And so the unspoken premise here, or unspoken promise, I should say here, is that you can get to knowledge and control if you just think hard enough, if you use your analytical power and maybe analytical instruments behind it as well. So that's kind of the mechanistic worldview. The key metaphor, I think, here is that an organization is a machine, and you try and understand it as a machine. And it may be a very complicated machine, but what you're trying to do is understand it. The opposite worldview that I would like to put forward here is what we call a complexity worldview. And it comes from complexity science, which which kind of traces its roots to the work of Nobel Prize winner Ilya Prigogine, a Belgian scientist. And here at Cranfield, we actually have a direct kind of intellectual lineage to the work of Prigogine, because one of his early students was a young British scientist, Peter Allen, who subsequently came back to the UK and joined Cranfield and established a Center for Complex Systems Research. And then Peter taught me and my colleagues as well. So this is kind of, these ideas are very much part of the conversation, bigger conversation here at Cranfield as well. And so this complexity worldview actually doesn't start with assumptions. It starts with a few observations about the world as it is, right? One of these observations is that just there are multiple entities in the world, right? So there are many people in an organization. There are many organizations in the supply chain or in an ecosystem, right? There's just multiple things. So far, so good. This is not very controversial, hopefully. The other big thing is that these things are different. They're not the same, right? You can't say 500 million worth of labor because, well, every person is different and they respond to things differently and they have different motivations and different talents and they work in different combinations and so on and so forth, right? So we have to account for the fact, explicitly account for the fact that these elements are different. And as one of my colleagues here at Cranfield, Gene Bolton, says, people don't just dissolve into the system, right? If you join a system, you still retain your individuality, right? So for example, if you join our MBA program, be it the full-time program or the executive program, you will be part of a cohort, right? But you won't dissolve into the cohort. You will still be you, right? And in fact, the composition of the cohort determines quite a lot of things about this cohort, right? We'll talk about it in a second. Right? Two more things. One is these elements talk to each other, and in the process of talking to each other, in the process of connecting with each other, they change. So again, if I use the analogy of an MBA cohort, when you show up, you see each other for the first time, and everybody's sort of everybody's equal, right? But over time, as you work together, you participate in social activities together, you do MBA competitions, right? You begin to form relationships. You begin to like certain people. You begin to perhaps dislike certain people. You form friends. Sometimes you form romantic relationships, right? And at the end of the MBA, this is not just a collection of random individuals, but because you have changed and the relationships between you have changed. And of course, this happens in organizations as well. And sometimes I use a very silly example, but I mean, if you think about a car that runs on a diesel engine, the engine can't at some point say, well, I've had enough of diesel, can I have some petrol now, right? But if you have a salesperson who has worked on commissions for a while, could actually plausibly at some point say, well, you know what, this doesn't work for me anymore, and I want a share of a company's profit, right? because I'm now in a different place. I have built my own wealth, I have built my own relationships, I have built my social capital within the company, and and I would like to have a different arrangement. Right? So through the process of interacting, these elements change, right? And the relationships between them change. And the final point here is that this entire situation is open to the outside world. It's open to the flow of knowledge, money, people, information, and so on and so forth. Right? So now pause for a second, look at these four things and think, well, is this a realistic description of the world? And I hope you would agree with me that it is. And if it's true, think about then the task of pursuing your intentions in this world, right? Think about the task of strategic management and strategy in this world. It immediately becomes a little bit trickier than trying to manage a mechanism, right? So a couple of more thoughts on this, and then we'll bring it to a close by thinking about, well, what would strategic management and what would strategy look like in a world like this? So one thing that I'll say is the language is important here. So not every complicated system is a complex system. So what I've got on the screen at the moment is the technical drawing of a plane, right? And this is certainly a complicated system in the sense that it's very sophisticated. There are lots of parts that are connected in different ways. One of the things here is we're certainly hoping that in the process of connecting to each other, these different parts of the plane don't change, right? We hope that we build a system and it stays stable, right? So in that sense, it's not really a complex system. You can call it a sophisticated system, an intricate system, but it's not a complex system, right? This is a complex system, a city, right? Where you have a combination of people, buildings, animals, birds, organizations, any interests, right? All sorts of things. And of course, every day the city changes, sometimes slowly and imperceptibly, sometimes very quickly, right? But it actually, it produces novelty, it produces change, it produces effects that you can't predict in many cases, yeah? So this is a complex system. So I'd like to show you kind of the 5 key implications of this complexity worldview so that we can then think about, well, what challenges do they pose to strategic management? And then how do we actually do strategy in this world if this is true, right? So one big implication of this is this so-called systemic view, the idea that some of the big and important factors emerge at the level of the system as a whole and can't be traced to the individual elements. Right? So for example, I don't know if there are any football fans around you on the call, but if you suppose you take 11 best players in the world, put them together, are you going to get the best team? Probably not, right? And the question is, why not? Or equally, if you take the best possible team, break it apart into its individual 11 players, will they be the best players in the world? Probably not, right? And that's the idea that actually things like performance, for example, they don't really make sense on the individual basis. They only arise as a systemic property. Right? And you can immediately see the enormous challenge of trying to manage performance, because you can't just generate it through levers and buttons. Right? Performance, in a way, inheres, it sits in the interactions between the players, right? Between the elements. And this is, of course, very true about organizations as well. Right? Culture is a very similar thing. I mean, if you look at organizations, they have a culture, but then can you kind of understand where the roots of that culture is and who carries them? I mean, it's almost a nonsensical question, right? But then it makes things like culture, performance, and resilience very difficult to manage, or at least very difficult to manage in a linear, mechanistic way to which we have gotten used to. Another big implication of complexity is the idea of emergence, and that's the idea that complex systems tend to produce novelty, right? Tend to produce coherent patterns, coherent phenomena that in many cases could not have been predicted. Right? For example, I spent a lot of time in America as a young person, and I saw a lot of examples where if the federal government would put a highway straight through a city, right, or straight through a town. And in many cases, what happened over the years is that the two parts of the town developed in different ways. One became more residential and attracted then, therefore, people who wanted to, who liked more residential kind of flavor and atmosphere, right? And another town became, for example, more industrialized, or in many cases, crime-ridden, right? And you could see that just the fact of introducing a highway, right, introducing a road through a city, actually drove different parts of the city to develop in completely different ways, and in ways that could not have been predicted. And certainly, this was not a desired outcome of the government who was putting the road through the city, right? And this is an example of emergence, right? So when you introduce an action into a complex system, you get back results that are in many cases surprising. Right? In organizations, for example, in many cases, this takes the form of workarounds, right? So a management introduces the initiative. Okay, so that's done, right? This is a performance improvement initiatives or a great KPI, right? Only to find out that there are lots of examples of what we call unintended consequences of performance measurement, right? All sorts of shadow processes emerge to work around this KPI, right? To keep the practices the same while kind of addressing the KPI in just in form, right? So that's an example of emergence, right? And that's what happens when we try to affect a complex system in a directed way. So 3 more. One is this idea of non-linearity, right? And that's the idea that sometimes we introduce a change and nothing happens. Sometimes we introduce an entire program of change, a new strategy, right? With an implementation program behind it, and nothing happens, right? The organization just resists and ejects this change, right? And in fact, entire governments have changed their course and their policies because of the resistance that they have not anticipated. Right? So this is very true, not just on the level of organizations, but even on the level of countries. Right? But sometimes you could introduce a small change and suddenly it just gets taken up and is blown out of proportions. Right? So for example, if take for example the introduction of a new bonus scheme. Right, so an individual bonus scheme to salespeople, right? So the more you sell, the more you earn, right? If this lands in an organization that is built on team culture and culture of collaboration, what do you think happens? I'll give you just a second to think about it.
Say it one more time.
Yeah. So if you introduce an individual bonus scheme in a collaborative team-based culture.
People are thinking. Here we go. Who's going to be first in? Disaster, Will says.
So it's interesting what kind of disaster, right?
Yeah, Will.
Yeah.
What kind of disaster?
Lots of things could happen.
It would make the organization more individualistic and lose that team element.
Absolutely, right?
Suraj.
So you could destroy the culture, right?
Everyone works for themselves.
Yeah. Yeah, so you can actually destroy the culture that actually kept that organization performing, right? That actually that underpinned the performance of the organization.
So said pretty much the same. Over competitiveness may create divides.
Brilliant, right? Or if the culture is really, really strong, it could just push it aside, right? It could resist these bonuses and say, well, you know what, and we still have our own ways of doing things, and there will be workarounds around this. Right? So you could introduce something that is very clear and very directed, but the result is not guaranteed, right? Alternatively, you could introduce something like this in an organization that has a very competitive culture and very individualistic culture, and it could fly beyond your wildest dreams, right? And in fact, people will start doing things you never actually wanted them to do, right, for these bonuses, right? So that's an interesting thing, that complex systems don't respond in a linear way. Sometimes they resist your actions, sometimes they take your actions beyond your wildest expectations. Connected to this is another implication of this, is that in complex systems, change doesn't take place in an incremental linear fashion. Right? So sometimes you get long periods of stability where organizations resist change, right? And this is why complex systems are in many cases resilient, right? So you push them, you introduce something, and they move around and they say, well, right, nobody cares. Then you say, yeah, but this is really needed, and they say, nobody cares. And in many cases, the way you can relate to this is a very common experience of banging your head against the wall, trying to actually show, let's say, to the management, what's really relevant, what really needs to be done. But at that point, the system is just not in a place where it's ready to accept it, right? And yet sometimes the system changes dramatically, right? And so you have these tipping points where the accumulated effect of these changes just moves the system into another state, right? And so what you could have is you could have organizations that are on the surface unassailable, right? You look at them and you think, well, this is a 130-year-old bank, right? Like in the case of Credit Suisse, for example, right? What can possibly happen to it? And then it literally disappears within a weekend, right? Which is what happened to Credit Suisse, right? And which is what happened to lots of organizations. Kodak is probably the proverbial example, but also retailers like Toys R Us in the UK, Carillion, a big construction company here in the UK, right? Nobody would have thought that, nobody actually saw them as being in decline, and yet they disappeared within days, right? Or sometimes weeks maximum, right? So systems have this property or this propensity to be really stable for a long time and then change very quickly. Right? If you want a bit of a kind of a bit of a jargon here, sometimes we talk about this as punctuated equilibrium, right? So an equilibrium for a long time, punctuated by periods of change. And so the final implication of this, the final implication of complexity is that every choice matters. And every choice is irreversible, right? It puts you on a particular trajectory. And so every decision closes off certain possibilities and opens others. And that means you can never go back, right? If you try a system, you can certainly at some point decide to scrap it, but you will be dealing with the legacy of that system. Right? You could try and explore a no-frills market for your product, but you can get the customers accustomed to seeing you as a no-frills cheapo, right? You could try and explore a particular geographic market, and you could get a significant part of your employee force moving there, right? And then you can't get them back. Right? So every decision actually matters, and there's no way to roll it back, right? So life only takes course going forward, right? And sometimes people talk about it as the arrow of time. So if you look at this, I mean, these are the big implications of the complexity worldview. This idea that a lot of important aspects only appear on the surface, on the level of the system, that there's novelty, that you don't really know how much of an effect your action will produce. The idea that change doesn't take place linearly, but takes place in fits and starts. And the idea that you can't roll back what you're doing. Right? And if this is true, then the question of how we do strategy becomes a much, much more difficult question. And in a way, if I were to summarize it, the complexity view assumes that at its core, the world actually is uncertain and emergent. And if there are bits of knowledge and control, that these are islands, the temporary islands of stability that we have acquired at a very high cost, right? And actually keeping things knowable and controllable costs us a lot of money and a lot of effort. Right, so what do we do then? What do we do as leaders and strategists? And I'll show you the framework that we use here at Cranfield across all of our courses, the full-time MBA, the executive MBA, the open executive programs and customized executive programs as well, which kind of talks about strategy in a way that acknowledges the complexity of the world. And this is the framework that we call the 5 key questions. This is the framework that we developed here at Cranfield. But if you look at strategic management in general, at conversations and strategic management, there are people and institutions that have independently arrived at very similar ways of thinking about strategy. And to me, this is a reassurance that this is actually a very, very meaningful and very practical way of thinking about strategy. So very quickly, it's called the 5 key questions because we've got 5 key questions. And these are the 5 questions that we need to answer, or the answer to which we need to work out for ourselves in order to figure out where we need to go. Right? Question number 1, going on top, is where to compete. The markets where you want to play, right? The markets where you want to compete. It could be the industries where you want to compete. Right? It could be the sectors where you want to compete. Right? So where are you even channeling your efforts? Now going sort of clockwise, once you've figured that out, the next big question is, well, how do you compete? How do you win in those markets? How do you think about competitors? How you position yourself against these competitors? And so how do you actually win it? The next 2 questions, what assets are required and what assets do we have? Look inside the organization and say, well, that's all well and true. I mean, the markets may be full of opportunities, but do I have the capabilities to take advantage of those opportunities? Right? So what sort of capabilities are required for these markets, and do I have them? And if the gap is too big, then we might actually we might need to go all the way back to where to compete and rethink it. Right? But if the gap is manageable, then the final question, the 5th question is, well, how do we change? How do we change the organization? Assuming of course, the fact that change is a very, very difficult thing to do. Right? And if you think about it, if this is the way you think about strategy, then first of all, it's not a plan, right? Because in a way, planning long-term in a complex world, it just makes no sense, right? You can't plan for the future because nobody knows the future. So that's, first of all, it's not a plan. Second, notice that this is phrased in questions, as questions, for a very particular reason, because if this is phrased as questions, then it keeps you grounded in the present moment and in the present context, right? Because you will only answer these questions depending on where you are today. Right? So it's very relevant, very practical, and it grounds you in reality. Right? And the third bit is these things are connected. Right? So you have to attend to multiple aspects of reality, multiple aspects of the system in an integrated way. And in a way, I mean, sometimes students push me for the definition of strategy, which I don't like to do, but I'll share with you kind of my angle at strategy. If you want to kind of think about what strategy is an integrated set of choices. Right? It's a set of choices about where you go and what you do. It's quite different, right? Quite kind of diverse, but it's also integrated, right? It pulls things together. So we do, of course, much more on the MBA, kind of unpacking this system and looking inside each of these bubbles and each of these boxes. But that's kind of the overall way of thinking about strategy that we have here, which I believe is much more suitable to the world as it is than some of the traditional ways about thinking, which are based on the old mechanistic assumptions. So bringing this to a close, just a couple of thoughts. One of the things about strategy in a complex world is that, on one hand, we are not gods, right? And we can't design or we can't engineer organizations as we see fit, right? We just don't have that power. On the other hand, our actions are not random and not inconsequential, right? Our actions actually do have consequences, and our decisions and choices are consequential. And I quite like the quote by an American complexity scientist, Scott Page, who says that in a complex system, a person controls almost nothing, but influences almost everything, right? So all of our choices are actually consequential. We just can't control the outcomes of these choices. And so what happens is that strategy making and choice making is in this very uncomfortable middle ground, right? And I would say that this is why people come to universities and people do degrees and people think about this for a long time. Because if you just want to learn the tools of strategy, right? I mean, doing an MBA is a waste. But the question here in the middle, if you are in the middle as a strategist in a complex system, then the only way for you to get better is to transform and grow. And in a moment, you'll hear from my colleague Leila talk about the transformation MBA. And I think to me, this is why you need transformation, because this is not about being a better strategist is not about tools, right? It's about figuring out how do you deal with uncertainty? How do you work with people? How do you work with people whom you don't like? Or how do you work with people who don't like you, right? What's your definition of success? Is your identity tied to your competence? And can you actually stretch it and can you improve it? How do you deal with failure and feedback, right? These are the things that are critical for strategy in a complex system. And these are the things that you would actually go through and develop by doing an MBA. And I think good education at its core is transformational. So I'm going to stop here. And the only thing that I will say is that if this way of thinking about management and strategy appeals to you, just a couple of years ago, I did a long interview with Jean Bolton, who is a visiting fellow and a complexity specialist here at Cranfield. I spent years talking to her about this stuff. And at some point I said, Jean, we need to sit you down and we need to do a long conversation about this. If you look at this, I mean, we spoke for 3.5 hours, right? In this very studio, you can see this very table. If this appeals to you and if you find this interesting and you would like to learn more about this, this is on our YouTube channel, on the School of Management's YouTube channel. So I'm almost out of time and I'm going to stop here.
Hands up whose head is hurting. My head is about to explode. If your head is about to explode, we're very keen to hear from you. I also heard you say doing an MBA is a waste. We want to hear from Leila. So Leila, pin your ears back. I heard Andrey earlier on say, think about doing an MBA to get control. So Leila, can you tell us?
No. I said the opposite.
You said the opposite.
I said the opposite.
Okay. We want to get control, Leila. So tell us how we do that and tell us more about the MBA.
Thank you so much. And thank you, Andrey. I love masterclasses because they it really brings it to life for our audience in terms of how it feels like to sort of sit in an MBA lecture room. And Andrey is very modest. He's one of the most popular professors on the MBA. So everyone loves him and his classes. It's because I think, as he mentioned, it's all about, I think in an age of AI, the application of tools becoming less and less relevant or would give less edge to you as a professional. It's all about how deep you can think. And I think the perspective that Andrey is kind of promoting on the MBA through the core module on the strategy, but also an elective module on philosophy, which is called Leaders as Thinkers, is about how you can become, thinkers and, deep thinking, how you kind of go about, all of those dimensions and adopting new perspectives. So I think it's all about kind of giving you that sort of new lenses that you can, through which you can look at the world and explore. I'm Professor Leila Alinaghian. I'm a Professor of Business Relations and Impact here at Cranfield and the Director of Full-time MBA. Thank you for joining us today and thank you for your interest in Cranfield MBA. I think it's called Transformation MBA because that's the most common word that we hear from alumni when they kind of complete the journey. And I suppose it's because, as Andrey mentioned, we very much focus on the journey rather than the destination. So for us, it's all about the process that kind of helps to build the change in you, the process that sort of transforms your outlook, your mindset, your knowledge, your network. And the outcome will naturally happen. So it's all about kind of investing in yourself and sort of, people describe it as self-indulging because it's going to be all about you. Especially on the full-time MBA, which is an immersive experience and you sort of giving up what you had in terms of your career and your salary for a year to, to immerse yourself into that sort of experience. We had quite a few exciting years in recent time. We celebrated the 60th anniversary of Full-time MBA. It was established in 1964. That was when the School of Management was born, really. I think the kind of common theme for us over the last few years has been the steady rise across various rankings. You know, very proud of being ranked second in Europe. You know, we have so many top schools in Europe. Being ranked second in Europe for the quality of teaching and learning is absolutely brilliant to see. And I think you've seen a flavor of that in our masterclass today. It's mainly because of kind of our philosophy and approach to teaching and learning and practical orientation. And focus on you and those sort of engagement and interactions that sort of set us apart, in my view. We climbed the Financial Times ranking 8 places, being ranked first in Europe for career progress. Again, links to the notion of transformation and progress, as well as the QS climb 14 places and so on. I've also been fortunate to kind of have the opportunity to rethink the future of MBA a couple of years ago, and we have now a new redesigned MBA program that sort of resonates better for our new audience and the kind of the new generation. So we're very proud of our heritage and keep trying to maintain the traditions, the MBA traditions, which are very much loved among the MBA alumni community, but also we want to kind of keep it exciting for the new generation and relevant and current, basically. Over the years, Cranfield MBA has put so many individuals in the C-suite. So we have so many successful CEOs at the helm of organizations in various sectors and countries and top companies that are kind of making an impact to the world every day. And we're very much proud of them because I think, like Andrey said, it will give you a toolkit, so you will have a toolbox to access. But beyond that, it will give you a series of meta capabilities, the ability to influence, to persuade, the ability to be a good storyteller, you know, narrative. How would you drive a narrative in an organization when you sit around the boardroom? How would you, you know, think creatively and sort of have that kind of a strategic thinking and authenticity in you? So the focus is on those meta capabilities that will stay with you, and you kind of craft them as you go along the journey. So if you're passionate about presenting Cranfield in the boardroom and passionate about taking your career to the next level, I think you're in the right place. I had the opportunity to meet with many of you and kind of talk about the structure of the program, but I wanted to also take the time today a little bit to sort of take you through the overarching structure for those of you who are less familiar with the one-year full-time MBA program. The program is run in 4 parts. The first part is kind of span across 6 months, and you will complete 10 compulsory subjects, the key functional areas in business and management, from accounting and finance. I have Matt with me in the studio, who's teaching on the finance module for us, accounting and finance module for us, all the way through economics, entrepreneurship, marketing, operations, and Andrey talked about strategy as well. The focus on sustainability runs through all of our modules, but also we have a dedicated module to sustainability. And finally, the emphasis on leadership and personal development, that's kind of been in our DNA, and that's something that Cranfield is very famous for. 2 key subjects that I wanted to highlight that kind of runs across the year. One is the analytics, AI and consulting module, where you kind of learn about business analytics, different quantitative and qualitative methodologies. But actually what's interesting about this module is where you kind of apply that into a real life consulting project. So you will work with real life clients. So we have a portfolio of top clients that we worked with over the years. This year we have 3 projects with Ernst & Young, you know, in sustainability, in blockchain, in various sort of current topics that kind of they keep them awake at night. But also we work with Civil Aviation Authority, for example. This year we work with Cerium, which is a analytics giant in aviation as well. And I think it's interesting to kind of put yourself in the shoes of a consultant, because when companies come to you, things are messy. Things don't look great, so they don't know what's wrong with they don't even haven't had a good framing of the problem. So your job is to kind of frame the problem. Your job is to sort of diagnose the environment, understand what's going on, and kind of reframe the problem and represent it back to them. So most of the time you will spend on framing the problem before engaging in crafting a set of pragmatic and innovative solutions. So that's quite fun. That's a lot of energy, and you gain a lot through those interactions with real life consultant and organizations. The second layer is the career development and enhancement, which is something that's quite new on Cranfield MBA and very unique within the MBA world generally, because I think MBA is an investment. So you invest and be conscious that you want to get return on your investment. That's important to you, and that's very important to us. The challenge that we've seen over the years for our MBA students was the lack of time to be able to invest in their career development. And I think the separation between the career services and career development support from the MBA curriculum meant that they couldn't focus entirely on this. So we kind of created a systematic journey for our students to kind of invest in that exercise by starting learning about themselves. It all starts with self-awareness, your strengths, your motivators, your weaknesses, your career anchors. What does career mean to you? And then engage in exercise of learning about the options that are available to you and the growth trajectories and potentials, and where you want to be in immediate future, but also longer term. And then we engage you in various workshops and sessions for you to sort of talk to people who are there already, been there, done that, to sort of learn from them and sort of kind of get a sense for how it feels to, for example, transition to consulting or financial services, or moving from energy to healthcare and so on. It's kind of a systematic design where you have to submit your career vision and plan, and at the end of the MBA you've got to submit your career development portfolio in terms of the activities you engage to fill some of those competency gaps. And it's been quite successful. So it's the second year that we kind of run this on the MBA, and probably we have Nadine with us who's kind of talk a little bit on that probably. The second part is about the electives, and that's where you kind of gain discretion over your learning. So we have a series of elective modules where you can choose in the space of entrepreneurship and entrepreneurial finance. I mentioned philosophy, leaders as thinkers module. We have modules on project management, supply chain management. So you kind of gain a little bit of discretion by choosing 3 elective topics. Part 3, which is again rather new on Cranfield MBA, and one of the kind of the unique features that sort of set us apart, is where you kind of travel abroad for a month to study at our partner business school, ESCP, which is a very established French grande école with multi-campuses across Europe. We're very aligned in terms of our values and our approach to teaching and learning, very much practice-oriented, but it's a chance for you to kind of experience a new educational environment. And I think going back to your transformation and growth, it's about being able to sort of get yourself into a new country, into a new city that you're not familiar with, and sort of sit in class next to another top MBA cohort and expand your network and engage in conversations and discussion. I'm very passionate about creating multicultural learning environments. So diversity is really, really important to us on the MBA. But also being in a new environment, a new educational environment, kind of makes you quite, adaptable to change and make you quite open-minded. And as a future leader, you're much better placed to change and drive a strategy or organizational change if you have a good understanding of different assumptions and values and the underneath behind the kind of the cultural interfaces. So yeah, that's very unique on the MBA. Again, probably Dean can reflect on her experience of going to Turin in Italy. So you have 3 specialization that you can choose: luxury, consulting, and fintech. And the last part of the MBA is where you can customize your journey further by choosing a career pathway. This is about supporting you into your immediate post-MBA career goals. If you want to work for an organization and pursue an executive route, we recommend that you would do a full-time internship where you actually work for an organization in the UK And I think depending on your motivation, if you're coming from a startup background and you want to sort of explore how it feels like to work in a corporate environment, we would sort of facilitate that. If you want to kind of understand the kind of the complexities and the nuances of a startup environment, that's also another avenue. But we work with all sorts of organizations, shapes, types, cultures, locations. We worked with Coca-Cola, we worked with consultings like Arup, Tata. We worked with a lot of engineering companies, manufacturing, Edwards, Natural History Museum. So I think wild and wonderful portfolio in terms of the companies that we kind of worked with. And if you have a passion for entrepreneurship and you want to use this platform to kind of kickstart your entrepreneurial journey, over the summer you have the opportunity to write your business plan and get mentorship from my colleagues in Bethany Center for Entrepreneurship and real life entrepreneurs who kind of support you in that journey of either starting a new business or kind of growing your business. Great. So I hope that kind of gave you a bit of a background and a flavor of how it feels like to sort of be on the MBA journey. Just briefly, I think I expect our MBA candidates to kind of have done the homework and look at various programs, because as I said, I'm very mindful that this is an investment and it has to make sense for you. It has to be the right product and experience for you for us to be able to kind of engage in that sort of partnership. What's unique about Cranfield MBA, I would say, is the focus and emphasis on career development and outcome. And we demonstrated that through having a credit-bearing module on the MBA around career development and outcome, and having 3 career pathways that you benefit from, in addition to a number of one-to-one advisory and coaching. So we just ran an event around the MBA Career Development Program that I encourage you to kind of go back and watch the video if you haven't managed to sort of attend the event. But there's a lot of layers and nuances around how we kind of prepare you for that transition, because I think MBAs have this common thing in common, and that's about they all want to change something. You'll reach a point in your career where you want to sort of transition either into a new sector, a new function, or sometimes you want to kind of move up the seniority ladder, but you sort of feel a little bit stuck. So I think that kind of pause or that sort of gap enable you to sort of make that transition. So, and we need to work together to be able to work on your transferable skills, but also educate you a little bit about the new context and where you're kind of transitioning to. The international experience I talked about, that's very unique in a sense that we send the entire MBA class abroad for a month, unlike many exchange programs that are available to only a handful of students. It's a part and parcel of the MBA experience. So to be able to kind of complete your Cranfield MBA, we expect you to engage with our partner institution, choose a specialization, conduct a second consulting project in Europe, and there's a lot of cultural elements around it as well that kind of contribute to your growth. Practical orientation, it's in our DNA at Cranfield, because Cranfield was set up to solve a problem after the Second World War, and it's a slightly different from traditional universities in a sense that we're very much interested in applied theory, in a theory that's relevant to the world and can solve a real life problem. So it's kind of everything we do is kind of grounded in that practical thinking. But in terms of manifestation of what that means for you, I talked about the consultancy project that you do at Cranfield. You do the second project at ESCP. You have the career pathway projects. And on top of that, there are a number of MBA specific competitions that our MBA students participate. Again, Nadine's got a good understanding of the whole portfolio, and she's done exceptionally well in one of the competitions on VCIC, venture capital and investment that we host at Cranfield as well, that she can probably tell you more about that. Focus on personal development. It's going to be all about you. Half of the game, Andrey mentioned as well, half of the game is about the technicality of how to run a business and learn the kind of the underlying theories in business and management. But I think the other half for us is you. Your understanding of you. We take you through a number of psychometrics tests so that you understand how you impact others, how you experiment in different leadership style where there are personality clashes. So you learn a huge deal about yourself and the impact that you make on others throughout that journey. We have an organizational behavior module that's quite outstanding in a sense of preparing you and helping you to kind of develop that mindset of being mindful of those differences and nuances when you engage with other people, and it helps you a great deal to understand where people come from when where they have a different style of work. We have a leadership in action module that's been redesigned this year with a focus on coaching, so leader as a coach, which I'm very proud of, because again, that's a contemporary view to leadership, moving away from command and control, again in line with Andrey's talking about earlier. It's all about how you lead others as a coach rather than using your authority necessarily. And the last point is about the alumni community. So Cranfield MBA is one of the first MBAs in the UK, hence we have a the largest alumni network among any other ranked schools. It's about the volume, but it's all about I suppose, the attitude and that kind of community spirit. So you've got to use the keyword Cranfield MBA, and the doors sort of open up. They welcome you into the community in a sense that they support us on various initiatives. We have an executive in residence where we connect you with top C-suite individuals to sort of for you to sort of talk to them about their career and learn from their career experience. I host the MBA speaker series. Tonight I'm hosting Kito Deboer, who is a former partner and director of McKinsey for 30 years and a diplomat and an investor. And so there's a huge opportunity to learn from top leaders who've been there, done that, and sat in seats that you're sitting now. So that's very inspiring for our student community. I don't say more about the faculty because you've seen one in action, but that's also one of the areas that students often talk about, the approachability, but also the practical experience that they bring to the classroom is one of the highlights of Cranfield MBA. I hope that gave you a bit of background, a bit of flavour of how it feels like to be on the MBA programme. More than happy to help with any questions that you may have, but probably I'll pause here now and hand over to Toby.
Leila, thank you so much indeed, and do feel free to put your questions to Leila. It's not too late to do that. We want to hear from Nadine. Gosh, Nadine, your name has been mentioned so many times today. Maybe start off, tell us a little bit about yourself, but I'm also keen to hear what your take on transformation is. Introduce yourself if you can.
Hi, Toby. Hi, everyone. I'm Nadine McEwen, and I am a Cranfield MBA alumni. I completed the program only last year, graduated in November. I'm currently a marketing manager at a Hilton hotel, and I came from the lovely Caribbean to the UK. The transformation.
Marketing manager at the Hilton?
Yes, at a Hilton property in London now.
Did the MBA help you with that at all?
Oh, 100%, definitely. I always say that the transformation MBA, it might sound a bit cliche, but it really is a transformation, because when I originally came to the UK and to study this program, the idea was for me just to level up in my current position, working in logistics and supply chain and going into more senior position. But coming here and doing the MBA made me realize that I'm taking a pause. And if there was any change or anything I needed to do differently, now was the time to do exactly that. And I did not have to step back into a position that I probably was not as passionate about anymore. So coming to Cranfield, I was able to do that. I specialized in luxury brand management. And as Leila mentioned, I connected with an alumni who works in the hospitality space, expressed my interest. And that was primarily how I was able to secure an internship at a hotel at Silverstone. And that created a further platform for me to be able to step into the role that I am now as a marketing manager in hospitality.
That's amazing. Leila talked about investments. It sounds like I know the answer to this question, but it was a wise investment for you by the sound of it.
It was like the best and maybe the worst investment of your life, because the best, because you're like, oh my God, I really get to do this for myself. And during the entire MBA program, you felt so invincible. You felt like you could do anything, whether it was take on a new career, go to a competition, explore things that you never did. But then when you're looking at yourself and you're not getting any sleep and you have wax to do and so many group projects, you're like, did I really sign up to do this to myself? But I will do it all over again tomorrow, honestly. It's one of the best investments I think I made in my entire life. It's something that I always wanted to do. Doing the MBA, so many doors have opened for me. I got to participate, as Leila mentioned, in VCIC. Prior to coming to Cranfield, I've never ventured into the world of venture capitalists, did not even understood how they worked. And now I have a fair understanding of that if it was something that I wanted to explore. I also participated in a Halt Prize, which is we were able to pitch business ideas for the term is escaping me right now, but it's for impact businesses that you need to develop an idea and present it for an award. I was part of the consulting club. I've never done consulting before either. So there were so many different avenues that open up for me that showed possibilities of if I wanted to change my career or do something totally different, the MBA provided that platform for me.
Nadine, you're an inspiration. One quick question before we go to Matt. We've heard from Andrey about a challenge, an intellectual challenge. I guess you're pushed quite a lot on the MBA, right? To think hard?
Think extremely hard. And even from Andrey, I'll tell you guys that Andrey's module, two amazing modules he did for us, but one of them, the assignment is a WAC. And once you come to Cranfield, you get to understand what a WAC is. You receive an assignment, and in 24 hours, you need to turn it around. Prior to executing the assignment, you know nothing. You don't know what company, you don't know what, you don't know anything about it. You show up, and on the day you receive the assignment, and then you have 24 hours to work with your team to get it done, and then you do a presentation. Talk about the team spirit, being resourceful, and everyone just really doing what, you know, putting their strengths in to get that across. And it was one of the most exciting modules, I think, for me. And it was impressive coming together, doing the work overnight, and presenting in front of judges who are all experts in their fields. And you do that in the classroom. Like, that was absolutely amazing.
Wow, that's good feedback for you there.
Very good.
Wow.
I still remember the presentation, Nadine.
Wow, look at that. It's seared into Andrey's brain. Stick around because there could be a bunch of questions for you, Nadine, but it's fantastic to hear you. It's brilliant to see you again. We want to hear from Matt, if we can do now, about the Exec MBA. Matt, we've got a bunch of people in the text chat who are already asking questions about that. But Matt, I'm going to hand over to you now to tell us a little bit more.
All right, thank you very much. So I'm Matthias Nnadi, the Deputy Program Director for the Executive MBA program. Much of what I've prepared to say will actually be captured by my colleague. Yeah, so I will just be brief on the main, perhaps, most interesting aspect of the program. Now, for the Executive MBA program,
I'm just going to get your face up there for a second. Bear with, there you are. One second. We're just struggling with the slides. Bear with. Yeah, keep talking about the Exec MBA. Your slide is up on the screen.
Okay, thanks very much. All right, I guess you can hear me very well?
Yeah, loud and clear.
Good. So I describe it as 2 is for 1. So you come in for a program, but you end up with 2 certificates or 2 qualifications. So it's a total of 28 months. So we have the what we call the Senior Leadership Apprenticeship Program, which lasts for 15 months. So that's the first part of the Executive MBA program. Now, when you're in that program, the idea is to transit to the full executive program. So when you have finished that part of the program, you are now formally admitted into the Executive MBA program, which is for another 13 months. So it's two parts to that program. So that's why you end up with 2 qualifications instead of 1. And I think that's also very unique because for most executive MBA programs, you just come in and do just the executive program. But here you have opportunity to end up with 2 qualifications. Now, I'm going to tell you some other interesting aspect of this program, because when you come in, you see that we have on the Senior Leadership Apprenticeship Program, you're going to have a total of about 11 modules which are going to take. And these modules would help you to prepare you for leadership. But in the second part of the program, you will now have a choice of specializing in any part of those elective areas. Either you want to specialize in commerce or commercial stream, or entrepreneurship, or finance. So there are 3 areas where you freely have to choose where you want to specialize. Again, this is very unique to our program, because we don't just do a generic executive MBA program, but you have to choose which area depending on your background or interest. Most people, for instance, who have finance bias would want to go for the finance option, where they specialize in finance. So that would be suitable for people perhaps who want to be, who are CFAs, or who want to be finance directors or learn more about finance. Or those who perhaps are interested in general business, or want to go into family business or development of their own sort of business. So they want to go into entrepreneurship. And then the other popular option usually is a commercial stream, where you go into general business management. So those are the 3 main areas where most students, students will have options to go. Again, as I said, this is a very unique option, because in most executive programs, you don't have that option to select where you want to go. Again, this depends on interest or background. Some companies or some individuals coming from a particular department in a business might want to go into any of these specialized areas. Okay, now depending on the stream you choose, so there are also elective modules and some compulsory modules. So for those who are on the commercial stream, they will have some specific modules, which of course is unique to them. And those going for the entrepreneurship, of course, would have a lot of modules around business formulation, entrepreneurship, new venture capital creation, and et cetera, et cetera. Those in the finance would have opportunity to explore more financial modules, whether it's corporate financial strategy or financial transactions, or even issues around mergers and acquisitions, which is handled by one of our partners, Grant Thornton. So we tend to use specialists in these areas to deliver these modules. Those who have passed through our programs usually enjoy, this idea of having streams, because it makes you specialize on specific area of management, because the idea is to make you a specialist in that area. Bear in mind that most of our students are usually people who are already working. So we always value experience. And that experience means that you learn from each other. You also have, of course, background knowledge before you come in, having worked in the industry for a couple of years. Now, for the exec MBA program, it's quite flexible in the sense that we have some sort of block teaching of 3 days monthly. So you have to dedicate that period for our lectures. Normally, our students would come in once in a month within Thursday, Friday, Saturday. So to have this block teaching. It's usually a full day. So it's something that you have to be prepared for. We always ask students who are interested in this to ensure they have arrangement in place. Some are family people, so they need to make arrangement to make sure that the family is looked after while they're here, because it's a full day commitment from 8:30 in the morning to about 5:45 in the evening. And they're going to, for each day, they're going to focus on a particular module. Say, for instance, if they have finance, so they have that finance throughout the day. The second day might be business strategy or whatever module they have. So it's a very full day kind of program. So something to be prepared for. And again, it's arranged in such a way that students would have also access to our virtual learning environment. We use Canvas here, where students could access the materials for the sessions or submit the assignments or able to contact their lecturers. One thing about Cranfield on our exec MBA program is that you have unlimited access to the lecturers, because we understand that students who are on these programs are also very busy, so it's always very important for us that we're able to get back to the students, whether with questions or something that you need clarity on. So that's something that faculty is able to do very quickly, trying to respond as quickly as possible. We also have run some sort of coaching session. My colleague did mention about mentoring. One of the things we do on the exec MBA program is that we have a partner, Grant Thornton staff, who come in to do one-to-one session with students on coaching. So they have about 6 sections allocated to each student, so that you are able to learn, some of these techniques. Most students have found it very, very useful because it builds your confidence, make you a very effective leader at workplace. Now, you might be interested in knowing the sort of the cohort, the age of the cohort, students that come on the program. On average, the age of our students is about just below 40 years. So you have an idea of the sort of students we attract. And they usually have good amount of work experience, on average about 14 years work experience. So we also attract students not just in the UK, but EU and international. Currently we have about 67% of our students come from the UK. Most of our students are home students, but we also have EU students who are about 15% of the whole cohort, and then international students as well. So you find a good mix in the group. And this is very important for students because you're able to interact, learn from people within the UK, EU, or international students, students from China, from various parts of Africa, from India, etc. And also from North America. We've attracted quite a number of students on our program. So it's a very interesting sort of group. And I do hope that when you join us, you're going to enjoy the program. For those, if you're thinking about coming in for September cohort, I know that the application portal will go live sometime in summer, so look out for that on our website. I know that we also have, recently have the May cohort, which we are expecting to start in May. About 48 students will be joining us in May. Currently, we have the March cohort, which is about 58 students. So the number is just about that average of 60 or thereabout. So this is what we're going to offer on the exec MBA program, and we look forward to perhaps seeing you in the near future, whether in May or in September, or whichever you want to start.
Matt, thank you very much indeed. It's a fantastic overview. You can be contacted if anyone has any additional questions. Can they contact you directly, or is it MBA inquiries?
Yes, yeah, that's fine. Yes, so you can contact me, or yes, we have a dedicated email for the for MBA inquiries, and they would get back to you as quickly as possible.
Fantastic. We only have a few minutes left, but I want to go back to Nadine if I can, because I want to find out a little bit about preparation. Nadine, if you're still there, should people be worried about preparing for the Transformation MBA? What was your advice?
I would say have as much fun as you can, get some rest, enjoy all of your home-cooked food, and just show up. There's literally nothing else that you need to do besides, of course, all your psychometric tests that you will receive via mail, and finalizing things. Because honestly, there is nothing more that I think I could have done besides showing up with an open mind, being open to all of the new things you're going to learn, adjusting to the weather, time difference. Honestly, there's nothing else that's needed but to show up fresh and ready and open for this new challenge that you're about to go on.
And get ready to make friends for the rest of your life and to meet them.
Yeah, make friends for the rest of your life, interacting with lecturers, exploring the UK, exploring Europe, just be ready. I mean, come and try and have fun. Yes, it's school, but at the same time, Cranfield, it's in a very unique location. You have lots of greenery, fresh air, you have some sheep nearby, and you're going to just enjoy fresh air. So just have as much fun as you can before you get here, because it's going to get quite hectic.
You sound so chilled. It's amazing. Leila, would you agree with what Nadine is saying? Not much prep involved at all?
Yeah,
Other than applying.
I agree with what we said around coming in with an open mind, because you're going to be, you have to be ready to be challenged by others and also challenge others' views. So it's so very important to kind of, turn up with that sort of mindset. I think some reflections around where you want to go, that would help, because as Nadine said, it's quite intense. So be sort of mindful of the fact that your thinking evolves, and so when you start, you kind of you start thinking about your, crafting your vision in a more detailed way, and your career plan, and as you learn and as you get exposure to different opportunities, that actually changes. But I think some prior reflection also helps. I think clarity of vision is important for us, but be mindful that it will evolve, and you have to sort of allow room for that as well. I think for me, it's just that sort of passion and kind of hunger to learn and sort of be engaged and take as much opportunity as you can. I think we always say it's sort of it's like a membership, a gym membership, that by just paying your membership fee, you're not gonna get the full benefit. So you have to do the exercise, you have to be engaged, and you have to sort of, what you put in is what you get out of the MBA investment, basically.
Fantastic. Showing up. I'm just laughing at that question in the chat there. Matt, we only have a few minutes left. I'm assuming you'd agree with what Nadine and Leila have said?
Oh, sure. It's usually very wonderful opportunity to study at Cranfield. For most students that have passed through our doors, they'll tell you perhaps it's one of the best decisions they've made. And on the Executive MBA program, I think we have the most flexible program. Just three days in a month. It's not too bad within 28 months. So you find the flexibility very attractive and very difficult to resist. So we'll hope that you come and join us and enjoy the atmosphere within the campus.
Matt, there's a question for you, and this is from D South. D South, thank you very much. Just to be clear, can we apply now for a September start on the Exec MBA, or is that to be announced shortly?
Oh, sure. Because we're dealing with the May applications, so the portal is open for the May application at the moment. In fact, we've just about finishing with that. So for the September, sometime around July, the portal will be open for applications, so you'll be able to apply. But feel free to send, express your interest, send us email and any other questions or things you need to know before then.
Matt, thank you. And it's worth saying that behind the scenes here in the text chat have been Jen, Ellie, Helen, and Claire. You're going to meet all of those people. I think, Nadine, you know them well already. If you've gotten this far in the recording and you weren't able to join us live, we are very pleased that you got this far. So please get in touch. I'm just going to come back to you, because you set us a kind of bunch of challenges earlier on, which makes you think thoughts that you never thought you could think. Is there no preparation for that? No, you're going to say.
Well, I hate to repeat what my colleagues have said, but the most important thing is to come with an open mind, because I guarantee you we will stretch your thinking to the point that sometimes is uncomfortable, right? We will challenge some of the assumptions that you have held dearly, right? And it's very possible that you will end up sticking to those assumptions, but you will do it more consciously, right? But it's also possible that you will move away and you will grow and change. And that's the part of the MBA that we call transformation.
That's quite a resounding finish. We have run out of time. It's been fantastic spending time with you. Leila, thank you so much indeed for giving us an overview. Matt, likewise. Nadine, what can we say? We owe you. It's been fantastic working and seeing with you again. Andrey, thank you for joining us in the studio. The producer today was Ellie Sharp. The studio managers were Robin Hackett and Marco Gomez. My name is Toby Thompson. Thank you for watching.